Hello and welcome to the IAAPA EMEA webinar on Brexit, where we present a step-by-step instructions on custom requirements that exhibitors and contractors need to know for the IAAPA Expo Europe 2022. My name is Janet Doyle, Operations Director at IAAPA for the EMEA region, and happy to host this webinar. Today we've invited our guest speaker, Tim Marchand from DSV, who is an expert on this subject matter. Before I hand over to Tim, let's first talk about IAAPA Expo Europe and what you can expect over the coming months ahead. A reminder, which I'm sure I don't really need to tell you, but just the dates for the show are the 13th to the 15th of September, and the conference dates the 12th to the 15th of September. The IAAPA Expo Exhibitor Services Guide will be out in the spring, so please keep an eye out for this. Our social selling assets are currently being updated to 2022, so also keep an eye out for them this spring. Also, look out for the exhibitor guest passes to use to invite all your guests. They will be also available in the spring. Let's look at your membership at IAAPA and the many ways in which you can engage. Please reach out to Nico or Ignace if you need further information about membership or you have any questions. Tap into IAAPA's exclusive knowledge base and find the tools to make your business smarter, safer, and more profitable. Utilize research reports on operational benchmarks, economic impact studies, and attendee projections. Discover these valuable resources and so much more if you visit iaaapa.org/research. Or read Fun World, the official magazine of IAAPA. IAAPA publishes Fun World magazine, the industry's go-to source for timely information and the latest trends, new products, and best practices from around the globe. Each member company at least receives one copy every 2 months. All these articles and much, much more are also posted on the IAAPA News Hub as well. The upcoming events, keep an eye out for our announcements very soon, but our IAAPA EMEA Spring Summit will take place in Rome from the 11th to 13th of May. Next week, Wednesday, the 16th of February, we have a live chat on sustainability 2022 resolutions. Coming up in April, we have an IAAPA webinar on sustainability case studies, including cost-benefit analysis. Before I give the stage to Tim, I now want to briefly share some housekeeping rules with you. All attendees should be muted. Using your computer audio is free of charge, but if you use your telephone to listen in, please bear in mind that charges may apply. Feel free to ask questions via the GoToWebinar panel chat box, and we will address those questions after each section of the presentation during a question and answer session with the speaker. Multiple webinars like today are offered monthly on various topics. If you missed one, they're available in the webinar archive, and the recording of today's webinar will be uploaded within a few days on the IAAPA website's digital archive and will be accessible as on-demand content. So if you visit iaaapa.org/webinars, you should be able to see it by the middle of next week. Enough from me and enough housekeeping. Let's hand over to Tim to talk about the topic in hand, Brexit custom requirements for IAAPA Expo Europe 2022. I'd like to introduce you to Tim Marchand from DSV, Agility Affairs and Events, who's an expert in this particular topic. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just bring the presentation up and then we can start for everyone. Okay. So as Janet said, this is a presentation on Brexit and exhibition logistics. Sorry, just waiting for the presentation to catch up. Apologies. Apologies about this, everyone. Just 1 second. Right, so sorry about that. Hopefully you can see the screen properly now. Some technical issues from my side. So firstly, an introduction. My name is Tim Marchant. I am General Manager here at DSV Fairs and Events in the UK. As you can see, I know a little bit about logistics, but IT is not so great at the moment. We have 2 offices here in the UK, one at the NEC in Birmingham where I'm based, and one at the venue for IAAPA 2022, XL in London. Myself, I've been involved in logistics for nearly 30 years now, and 15 years specifically at Agility / DSV. And just to explain for everybody the comments about DSV and Agility Fairs and Events is that you will know from working with us over the last couple of editions of IAAPA that Agility Fairs and Events were the official forwarder for that particular event. We as a business have been taken over by DSV, so moving forward it's the same team that you've dealt with before, but just under a new name. And as I said before, the reason why I'm involved in this conversation is that based here in the UK, XL London for us is a home, and that is the venue for IAAPA 2022, and we're looking forward to seeing you all there. The topics that we're going to cover, some basic information about Brexit, some of the key information and guidance that was mentioned around the time of the transition period. We're going to look at some of the responsibilities that you will have as shippers and contractors. Once we've done that, we'll go through a few how-to sections just to help guide you through some of those issues that you'll have to sort of work with. And then we'll look specifically at temporary customs clearance movements which relate to exhibitions and events. We'll kind of do a final advice summary, and then we'll obviously, as part of this process, we'll take questions as we go. We'll stop at the end of various sections, especially through the how-to section, just to take on your questions, and we'll answer them as we go. So this first slide here that you're seeing is something similar to what a lot of the Brexit guidance was that was placed out in the marketplace at the end of 2019 as we moved into the 2020 transition, and throughout last year and into this year as well. A lot of the information that was out there was to try and prepare people for Brexit and the coming changes, and primarily the most important thing that was coming was, instead of having free movement between the UK and the rest of Europe like we had before, we were now going to have customs clearance at various border points. And this would mean a change in documentation for people, more responsibility and things like that. But effectively, providing you followed those processes, there wasn't going to be any problems. There was big fears about congestion at borders. There was fears of a lot of business would stop, but effectively, for the businesses that were able to effectively produce the documentation that they needed to do, they had no particular problems. And as a general practice away from sort of exhibitions, the companies that tended to find the most difficulty were the ones that only operated within Europe previously and didn't have to deal with any sort of customs clearance. The big message to say is that there's nothing to be scared of in relation to Brexit, providing you get the information together, providing you work through the processes nice and early. You will have no problems shipping to IAAPA, and likewise returning the products back to your location at the end of the show. So just moving on to the responsibilities that fall on you as shippers and contractors when shipping to the UK. For any imports coming into the UK, you will need a UK EORI number. So this is for something for you to check and to see whether you have one, and if not, then you will need to obtain one. One of the reasons why you may have one is that you already have an entity, an office already within the UK, so they can act as an importer for you. If not, then it's something that you can obtain yourself, and we'll go through that process shortly as to how that's done. It's quite straightforward online process. You as shippers will have to prepare commercial invoices for the goods that you're being shipped. Within that, you'll need to have a clear description of goods. We'll need to look at tariff numbers, values, various declarations, but again, we'll go through that as we go through the presentation. You'll be responsible for arranging customs clearances, and by that, that's not something that you'll have to do specifically yourself, but there are forwarders that can assist you with this, and we have a network of agents that will be able to help through this process. You'll have to liaise closely with your forwarders to ensure that they have all the information that they need to assist you. That dialogue between you and your forwarders and us is very important to ensure that we have everything covered off and meet the needs so that all of your goods get to the show safely on time. From there as well, this is a very, very fine point and definitely won't be applicable to all of you on this call, but if you do operate your own trucks, there are a number of extra regulations that you need to kind of follow now. The general recommendation here is that if you are operating your own trucks, that you don't use them to bring to IAAPA unless you're very familiar with customs clearances and everything else, because there are a lot of extra regulations that you will need to go through. If you ship your goods with a recognized forwarder who can manage these processes for you, it will be something that you won't have to worry about at all, and it will take care of itself. And just as a final point on this particular slide, you need to consider the whole thing as a process. So it's not just about shipping the goods from your premises to the show. You also need to consider the re-importation side of it when it comes back after the show as well. So you need to look at the whole process as a holistic one and manage the whole process from end to end. But again, as I said before, if you're working with us, our forwarder network, our global offices, you won't have any issues with this.
If anybody has any questions on this first slide on your responsibilities, if you want to put them into the chat section, and we can ask Tim.
That's fine. So if we just work through the first section, so moving on to the first one of those how-to sections, EORI numbers. EORI numbers, they're basically, EORI stands for Economic Operators Registration and Identification, and effectively an EORI number is a way of governments, so in our case the UK government, or within the EU any of your local governments, that's a way of recognising that company. That number is individual to a company and it's assigned to them. The EORI system itself isn't new and isn't just related to Brexit. The actual system has been operating throughout Europe since 2009. And effectively, an EORI number is needed for any imports or exports into the UK. Any business, so I mentioned before that if there are any businesses that already have UK operations, those businesses will automatically have been enrolled into the EORI process. If not, then you're able to apply for your own EORI number, and this is an online process. It's done online. There's a link at the bottom of the slide, but if you were to Google apply for UK EORI number, then you will be taken to a UK government page, and then you just work through the application process. It's very, very straightforward. It will ask you various bits of information about your company, and once you've completed that process, the EORI number is generated within a couple of days. I will point out that you don't need to be a UK-based entity to apply for an EORI number. Any company in the world, wherever they are based, can apply for an EORI number, but you must have one to be able to import into the UK. So if you're based in Germany, Belgium, and you already have your own EU EORI number, that won't be applicable to the customs entries into the UK, but you can apply for a UK EORI number to assist yourself. So that's kind of it on EORI numbers. Are there any specific questions on EORI numbers that you would like to ask? I don't think we've got anything at the moment, so I'll move on to the next slide. And again, if you have any questions as you're working through and they're not specifically about the slide that we're talking about now, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can obviously come back to those topics as we get to them. That's absolutely fine. So moving on to the next part of the how-to process is commercial invoices or shipping invoices. And these documents are essential key parts of that customs clearance process. These are the documents that are submitted to customs along with the entries to be able to clear your goods into and out of the UK. These documents, they don't have to be a specific format, but they do have to include various pieces of information. And within that, that is the shipper and consignee addresses. So the shipper is obviously yourself, and the consignee would be your exhibition stand at the show. There needs to be a description of the goods that you're sending to the show. So that could be for the contractors, it could be stand building materials, for any exhibitors on here, any equipment that you're sending to the show that you're wishing to display. You would describe the products on the invoice. You'll need to look at quantities of items that you're sending, weights, value of goods. So it needs to be a kind of genuine commercial value of those goods. And likewise as well, looking at things like customs statuses. So are these goods going to be shipped to the UK and they are consumed or used at the show, or are they going to return after the show? Is there a potential that some of these goods may be sold in some way? Other aspects that we need to look at also on the commercial invoice as well is tariff numbers. Again, I'll talk about tariff numbers in more detail later on, but they are identifiers for your products in relation to customs, things like countries of origin, and importantly for exhibitions as well, there tends to be a declaration required on the invoice. As an example for IAAPA, the declaration may be something along the lines of that the goods are being exhibited at IAAPA Expo Europe 2022. So as I said, these commercial invoices are very, very important. This will be one of the starting points that you have when you come to shipping your goods. So once you've collated that information on what you plan to send to the show, it's vital that you get this information across to your forwarders and to us so that we can start working through that process with you. Okay. Do we have any sort of questions on commercial invoices? I don't think we're sort of seeing anything in chat at the moment. So again, I'll move on. So I mentioned on the previous slide as one of those things that we need for commercial invoices is tariff numbers. And tariff numbers are used to classify goods so that the correct tariff rules can be applied to a product. A lot of products have their own individual tariff numbers. Other products may fall under a category of other. And the idea of these tariff numbers is that they determine what duties and taxes would be applicable when those goods are imported into a country. The UK itself has a couple of different methods for tariff numbers. When you're importing something into the UK, the tariff number is 10 digits long, and when you export it, the number is reduced down to 8. The numbers primarily are the same, it's just an alteration in those last 2 digits. And you will tend to find that globally, tariff numbers tend to follow the same format. So a tariff number that you might see in your own country, generally those first 4 digits will be aligned globally, no matter where you're shipping to. But as you get further and further through that number sequence, they will alter slightly depending on which country you're exporting from or shipping to. For the UK, from a UK perspective, also on our government websites, we have a very useful tool called a trade tariff commodity checker. This is something that you're able to access quite freely online. You can go into there. That will give you a guide as to how to classify your products if you're not sure. There's telephone helplines available, and there's also various search bars and things like that within the process. And what I'll do now is I'll take you through how that tariff number process works, just with an example, just to give you an idea of how the process works. So if you were to, if you like, go onto the UK government's website, if you were to Google trade tariff checker, that sort of thing. This would bring you onto a page which would look very similar to this. In the search tariff box that you can see in the middle of the screen, you can type in the word of the product that you're looking for. And for the example that we're going to do here, we're going to use t-shirt. So if I was to type t-shirt into that trade tariff, it would then present me with a series of results. So on the screen now, you can see what the results would be if we typed in t-shirt. And obviously with a t-shirt being an article of clothing, the category that it falls under, it brings back the information from here. And you can see in the middle of the page there's a category there for t-shirts, singlets and other vests. And the idea of this page is that as you work through the process, you click on the little links and it expands the number out from initially, you can see that there's 2 digits here where it says 61. And then as you click through the various processes, it will add extra numbers into the number for you. So as we sort of work through, as you determine whether the t-shirt is made of cotton or other materials, you can see how the number expands out with the extra digits to give you those full 10 numbers that we were looking at before. And then once you've finally selected your final number, it will give you the information at the top of the screen. So you can see this here, the 6109 10010. That is the number that you would place onto your commercial invoice. And likewise, on the screen as well, it will give you information on any taxes or duties or that are applicable to this product. So that's everything on tariff numbers for now. Again, I'm not seeing any sort of questions in chat at the moment, so I'll move on to the next topic. And
Tim,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. There are a couple of questions that have come through. Do you want to take those now, or do you want to wait?
Fine. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We can do the questions now. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. First question is from Elke Keys. So now spontaneous sales, our possible UK EXORI number is different from our already existing one. I think the question there is, do they need to apply for a specific UK EXORI number if they already have one?
Yes, yeah. Again, EU EORI numbers are not valid within the UK. So even though you have one within Europe, whichever country you're in, you will still need to apply for a UK EORI to be able to import and export goods into this country. Again, just go through the normal online process that we mentioned before, and they'll generate a new number for you for your business to be able to use within the UK.
And another question, in case the goods are not consumable, but are stand building equipment materials that will return home, what kind of value shall be declared? Do they apply to a separate category when cleared?
We'll touch on some of that, the temporary movements later on within this presentation. But in effect, what you have to do when you're assessing your goods is you have to give a genuine commercial value to it. If you're doing a temporary import, or if we're handling this as a temporary import, you have a couple of mechanisms that you can use. You can either look at something called an AtaCarne, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, or we can do temporary import processes. And what that does is that the duties and taxes that would have been applicable to those goods are effectively suspended, and somebody like us in this process would take the liability of those goods for you within a time period. So then obviously once we come to re-exporting that, we need to ensure that those goods are then shipped back out. So there is a process in there from the point of view of the question itself, where it talks about the value. You must always try to look at a genuine value. So if you're shipping, say, a full trailer load of stand fittings, to then put a commercial value of, say, 100 or 500 US dollars or euros or whatever, just isn't a genuine value. It's best to put genuine values on there, but obviously those duties and taxes can be deferred in a way once they arrive at port through the customs clearance process, which I hope helps.
And then the last question for now, again, is with the EXORI numbers. If we have an EU EXORI number, do we need a UK EXORI number?
Yes, you will. You will definitely need a UK EORI number. As I said before, any EU EORI numbers that you have in place for use in your own country won't be applicable within the UK. But again, as I said before, the process is quite straightforward to apply for a UK one online. You would put the details of, wherever they're based. So if they're based in Germany or France or Italy or wherever, they would put their address details in for their office in that country. And then the number will be processed by the UK government and submitted to them and linked to their address in that country. Okay. Is that all of the questions now?
That's all for now. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. So moving on, the next stage of the conversation is transit documents, and this isn't something that you as an exhibitor or a contractor would have to do directly yourselves, but it's part of the process of the movement. It's definitely something that you need to be aware of, because it will have an impact on how you can move your goods. The idea of a transit document is that the transit document allows the movement of goods across borders between defined locations, and in effect, if the goods were moving from from the EU into the UK, a transit document is needed, potentially needed between these two locations to allow it to cross borders without having to stop at every single point along the way. The reason why this is important is that once a transit document is effectively taking control of that customs liability. So when you move your goods from country to country, instead of having to customs clear between every single country on the way, the transit document acts as a pass to be able to go through those countries without the need to stop the customs clearance at every point. This system has been in place long before Brexit. If we were moving goods between countries previously, then these documents would have been in place. And effectively, what they do is they suspend the customs duties. But somebody in that process, whoever holds that transit document for you, is actually taking the customs liability for you. So because there is a financial value attached to that, what you tend to find is that these transit documents and the movements around those transit documents are very, very specifically controlled. So you as an exhibitor will have to ensure that when you're working with your forwarders, that you're meeting their requirements, because they're managing these movements on your behalf in relation to these transit documents, and there are certain things that they have to have in place to ensure that they can safely move your goods from location. So as I said before, it's not something that you as an exhibitor needs to be directly worried about when you're moving your goods from your country to the show and the return afterwards. The transit documents will be part of that process, but it just means that some of the flexibility, the freedom to be able to do certain things that you would have had before pre-Brexit, they're not in play now, because these transit documents do hold some very specific liabilities attached to them. Do we have any more questions?
Not at the moment, no.
All right. I'll move on to another topic, and this goes back to one of the questions that we mentioned before about stand building materials and things like that, and certainly a number of the exhibits that may come to the show as well, especially high value goods. This system that we're about to talk about now, AtaCarne, may be very, very useful for you. Effectively, an AtaCarne is a passport for goods. And this allows the temporary import-export of certain goods, and this system operates in a number of countries around the world. And effectively, what a company can do is they can apply to their local chamber of commerce in your country. You can apply for a carne, or you can do this through your forwarders. You basically lodge a fee for this AtaCarne, and what this allows you to do is it gives you a document which is then stamped at various borders across the transit process, and this allows the movement of those goods to be actioned from, say, France or Italy or Germany to the UK, come and be exhibited at the show, and then return after the show without the need to pay duties and taxes on the way. The document itself, providing it's stamped at the various customs borders, that acts as a pass to allow the goods through, and then obviously return after the show. Carnets are generally valid for 12 months, so you could use them for IAAPA and other events as well. It allows multiple trips for the goods listed. So again, as I say, there are vouchers and pages within that document which are stamped by customs as they go. It's a very, very useful mechanism. It does ease the flow of customs at a number of borders. It stops the need to pay for certain duties and taxes, and certainly for high value goods as well. When you exhibit in another country, that tends to be, if you are sending high value goods, if you're not using an AtaCarne, then a customs bond needs to be in place. And they obviously can be quite expensive if you've got high value goods. So the AtaCarne obviously helps with that process and removes the need for those bonds. The usages, it's very much for exhibition goods that will return after the show. Anything professional equipment, tools, any samples that you're sending and that will return afterwards. Stand building materials was mentioned before as well. So again, if those stand building materials are coming across to the show and they're going to return afterwards, then these can also, carnets can also be used for that process. You're not able to use them for anything like consumables. So if you have goods that are coming to the show, like giveaways, any items that you plan to give away on your stand, or foodstuffs, or anything along that line that won't return after the show, the carnet can't be used for that process. As I said, if you're looking to sort of explore the idea of a carnet, the best option for you is to either speak to your local Chamber of Commerce, or you can speak to one of our offices or partners locally in your country, and they'll be able to help you through that process. Again, it's a fairly straightforward process. You would be asked to submit information on the goods, very similar to what we talked about before with commercial invoices. We would need to list out all of the items that are going to be shipped, their values, etc. And then that is submitted to the Chamber of Commerce, to the carnet holders, and then they would generate the carnet based on those goods for you afterwards. Okay.
We have a question, Tim, on the AtaCarne.
Yep.
If you have the AtaCarne, you don't need the transit document, question mark.
That's correct, yes, because in effect that carnet is acting as a transit document for you, and also a way to get through customs clearance as well. It acts as both mechanisms for you. Okay.
Okay, and another question, what's the best way to temporarily import goods that do not have serial numbers to uniquely identify them to guarantee or justify re-importation?
It's an either or. Serial numbers aren't essential for everything. Obviously you would need to sort of generate tariff numbers, but whether you went down the route of a commercial invoice or whether you went down the route of an AtaCarne, that's kind of, unfortunately there isn't, with customs clearance, not just in relation to the UK, but in relation to any country that you're going to go to where customs clearance is required. It's kind of, there isn't a one size fits all solution to this. You would have to assess what you're planning to send. You would be looking at things like, for me, if I was going to be shipping goods personally, I'd be looking at things like, is this going to return after the show? What are the value of the goods? It's all of those type of things that you would look at and assess, and then work out what is best for you on an individual basis. We've done a number of shows since Brexit in the UK, and we've seen a variety of different approaches. There are people who prefer to go down that commercial invoice route, and we've seen a vast number of carnets as well. So again, it's very, very individual to the companies that are shipping the goods. From our perspective, we don't mind either way. We're happy to work with you as exhibitors or contractors on either option. And again, as I say, when you look at that whole logistics process from your premises through to show site and back again, it's going to be very much an individual decision on what works best for you. Okay.
And just one more, somebody who missed the beginning of the webinar and wanted to know if a temporary export is needed, or do they need to do something else instead?
Okay. there's an element here that I may misunderstand the question, because obviously the word temporary export was needed within there. Now, this will depend on the country that you're shipping from as well. So if we look at the whole process from front to back, so in effect, when you're shipping from your own premises, you are going to need an export declaration from the country that you are shipping from. So that will be an export from your country. You are able to there are what are called customs procedure codes, and these do vary from country to country, so I can't tell you specifically what they are right now. And again, we can sort of pick this up individually as you contact us down the line, but effectively, when you export from a country, you can use a procedure code that says these goods are being exported from my country and they will return at a later date. So as an example for me, if I was to ship goods out of the UK, I can use a customs procedure code for what we classify as British return goods, which is then telling customs that these goods are being exported temporarily now, and they will come back to the UK at a later date. So in a whole process, you are going to have an export declaration from your country, you're going to have an import declaration into the UK, there's subsequently going to be an export declaration once the show is completed to leave the UK, and then when it comes back into your country, there will be an import declaration there. So for that process from your country all the way through to show site and back again, you are going to have 4 points of customs clearance along that route. So if you're doing commercial invoices, then there will be 4 customs entries along there. If we're using the AtaCarne option, what you would end up having is 4 different stamps as that carne crosses the border at the various customs ports. So to answer the question specifically, from a temporary export point of view, yes, there are ways to manage that says that this is being temporarily exported from my country and it will return, but there are other entries on top of that that need to be done to manage the whole process, which I hope I've answered the question without making that sound too complicated. But once you get into the process, it is fairly straightforward, especially if you're working with us and our forwarder network. Okay.
And just one final question, Tim. Does everything need to be in English?
From the point of view of importing into and out of the UK, yes, everything would need to be in English. Likewise as well, there will be countries that you are potentially exporting from where you will need to have your own local languages in there. So we see many examples where the invoice is just in English, and we also see a number of other examples where they are dual language commercial invoice documents. But yes, from the point of view of the specific activity of importing into the UK for IAAPA and then re-exporting again afterwards, that commercial invoice would need to be in English. Okay.
That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this next section again is very, very specific and probably isn't fully applicable to everybody on this call. The reason why we touch on it is, again, it's something that you do need to be aware of, and we are obviously aware as well that pre-Brexit there were a number of contractors and exhibitors that would just automatically load goods, exhibits, stand building materials, etc., into the back of their vehicle in Europe and drive them to the UK. Brexit has made this process a little bit more difficult, and even now, as I said before, we've seen shows since Brexit has come in and since the return of exhibitions post-pandemic, kind of the middle of last year. We still see a number of stand building contractors and to some extent exhibitors who still move goods in their own transport, but there are things that you do need to be aware of as you do this, because your vehicle then falls into those same mechanisms that the normal big transport companies that they need to follow as well. So within this process, there are very clearly defined responsibilities for drivers. There are a number within the UK. There's now, rather than just having customs clearances at ports, we now have a number of inland border facility locations. There are new systems coming in between now and IAAPA whereby safety and security declarations need to be done. At the start of this year, another new system was introduced called GVMS, which is during 2021, you were able to actually transport goods back into Europe and not actually customs clear directly at the port of entry. GVMS is something that was introduced at the start of 2022, which now means that a customs entry needs to be done, or certainly documentation attached to it to cover the arrival into the UK. Again, as I say, a lot of this is very, very specific to people who want to move goods in their own trucks. If I'm being very, very honest, it's not something that we would recommend unless you are unless you kind of fully understand all the regulations into the UK. You do this on a regular basis. We have the recommendation would be, certainly for most of the exhibitors in this webinar and a number of contractors, is again to work with our local partners in your countries. They will have transport solutions for you, which take away a lot of these responsibilities and make the whole process a lot smoother for you. However, if you do want to go down that route of moving goods on your own vehicle, then definitely ensure that you look at the guidance that's available on the UK website. You look at the local guidance in your own country in relation to exporting to the UK, and make sure that you follow all of the requirements within there. Otherwise, you will hit problems on the way. Okay. Do we have any more questions?
Not at the moment, no.
All right. So these last couple of slides, we're just going to kind of summarise a few more details in and around specific details to do with exhibitions and events. We obviously sort of talked to you before about an AtaCarne, and when we talk about temporary movements, again, when you've assessed what goods you're sending to the show, you may find that the AtaCarne itself is the preferred option for you in relation to the benefits of this system. What if you don't use that method and you do look at things like temporary imports and working on commercial invoices? There's just some things that you will need to be aware of, just from the point of view that when somebody is handling these goods for you and when they're being placed on a temporary import bond, there are restrictions that are put in place by those local country customs to ensure that procedures are being followed and goods aren't transferred into free circulation. So in effect, the customs liability for that product is being deferred and somebody's taking responsibility for that. So in effect, what would happen if you were shipping from your country to the UK and we did a temporary import for you, all the customs liability for your product would be placed on our bond, and customs dictate to us that we must have an element of control on those goods and ensure that they don't move into free circulation and ensure that they do leave the country correctly within a prescribed time period afterwards. So you will find that if you're requesting temporary imports from us, or if you were to attend other shows as well, if you were to request temporary imports from any contractor in a similar way to us, that you'll find that there is a number of control measures that need to be put in place. They're not difficult. It just means that those measures are in there for a reason, just to ensure that we're meeting the requirements of customs. When you do temporary movements, you may find that there are some relatively small delays at various customs checkpoints, just because they are not the normal everyday to-day movement. They are slightly different, so you tend to find that temporary movements, they tend to get selected for more physical and document checks. These checks are generally just a few hours. They are managed very, very quickly, and providing everything's all in place, you will navigate customs very, very quickly. But it's just to be aware again, in that process and in that planning structure, which between us and our forwarder network, we will help you with that, is that there are sort of just certain elements of delay to be involved in there. Specifically for UK events, as we sort of said before, there are specific customs procedures that allow us to import goods into the UK. As I said before, when we do this for you, we will manage that process for you, placing it on a bond or a similar scheme that we have, and we must have sort of control of those goods. So in effect, if you were shipping to the UK and we manage the temporary import for you, we have to be involved in that process for the re-export afterwards to ensure that all of that bond liability is cleared off correctly, and that all of that liability with customs is removed and cleared off. And just sort of to close off this webinar, I'm just going to sort of go through a kind of a final advice summary, if you like, just the key points from what we've kind of discussed through this webinar, just to kind of help you in that process. The first point would be, again, sort of check the guidance. There's information within this webinar. There are websites on there, out there that can obviously help. And obviously, if you're speaking to us or our agent partner network, then obviously we'll be able to help you with some basic guidance on what you need to do. The very obvious thing to start with is that UK area number. We kind of said at the start that this is an essential part of the process. So it's a fairly quick online process. So without leaving it until the last minute, say in sort of August and things like that, certainly a little bit early in the process, just ensure that you've got your EORI number applied for, because even though they tend to be quite quick, if there are any problems with your application, it will give you time just to sort those out and have everything in place. One of the key things that we've seen with Brexit is that, going back to what I commented on before, if you had an EU shipment beforehand, you were very easily able to load goods into a vehicle at the last minute, book a ferry crossing to the UK and just drive across those borders quite easily. I mentioned before that potentially now shipping from Europe into the UK and back again, we've now got a process whereby 4 customs clearances are needed. So it's just, again, it's about that, just don't leave everything until the last minute. Consider it nice and early in your entire exhibition process, and start those conversations with us and with our partners, and we'll be able to guide you through that process. Where we tend to find the biggest issues are at the moment are the ones that are leaving things until the last minute. But everybody that we've dealt with that's tried to pick this up nice and early, so for a lot of you guys, this will be picking it up in summer. Once you've kind of got to that process and you understand what you need to do, what you're planning to ship, then, like I say, speak to us, speak to our agent network, and we'll guide you through that process. Our recommendation, obviously, is we are involved. We are, or we'd like to think that we are definitely experts in exhibition logistics and site handling and everything else. And all of our DSB offices in fairs and events offices within Europe, and our agent partner network as well, we do these type of movements day in, day out. So we are aware of the various pitfalls and issues and things like that. If you speak to us or speak to anybody that specifically knows what they're doing with exhibition movements, that is the best piece of recommendation that we sort of give you in here, and they will really help and guide you through that process. This may or may not be applicable to some of you, but things like alcohol and foodstuffs, there are various restrictions on these items, so you may want to avoid sending them because these are likely to certainly flag extra checks, or you may, as an example, alcohol cannot be imported into the UK as duty and tax-free giveaways. If you were to ship alcohol from Europe into the UK, a full customs clearance will be needed. You will have to pay all of the duties and taxes, all of the excise duties attached to that. So if you are looking to have alcohol on your stand or whatever, then the best option would be is to source something locally, either through Excel or through another mechanism in the UK to do this. Likewise with foodstuffs, there will be a number of restrictions. At the moment, shipments of foodstuffs between the EU and the UK, there aren't a lot of restrictions on foodstuffs at the moment. They were only starting to kick in from the start of this year, but certainly by the middle of this year, there will be another level of restrictions on foodstuffs. Again, it's not that they can't be shipped. We handle a number of food shows here in the UK, which we do foodstuffs imports for, but just be aware that if you are planning to do that, there are extra hurdles and extra documentation that you may need to do, which when you consider the benefit of it, you may not think it's worthwhile to do. And just as a sort of final point is that, again, going back to that message before, obviously pre-Brexit, you were able to kind of load goods onto a vehicle, just book a ferry and come across to the UK. It's, there are changes to how you need to do things now. You have to look at the process much earlier. You have to look at customs declarations. You have to work with forwarders. But likewise, the whole process is not too dissimilar to what you would have had to have done before if you were shipping from the UK to the US. You're now in that same kind of, shipping to the UK should be kind of treated in the same way that you were shipping to the US, because those same ideas of transit times and customs clearances and everything else, that's also part of that process now. So that's pretty much everything from me. I hope that this has been a benefit to you. We'd like to thank you for your time, and obviously, like I said before, we're here to help. And again, if there's any sort of more final questions in this process, I'm happy to help.
We have a few more questions, Tim. Someone's just asked, we are shipping most of the goods through a transporter, but are usually taking goods and spare parts through our own van. Is it going to be an issue with the AtaCarne?
Okay, yeah, that's when this is where, in effect, if you've got a few spare parts with you in a van and things like that, this is where it's a very difficult question to answer, because obviously that shipment that you do, that's the main commercial export of the product, there will be customs clearances and everything else attached to that. In effect, when you're coming across from Europe, say with some spare parts in your vehicle and everything else, in theory, they are also supposed to fall into those same commercial moves and everything else. However, the likelihood of you being stopped and flagged and everything else, it's very difficult for me to say. The official line to that would be is that if you're bringing spare parts with you and bringing them across in your own van, or even if you were bringing them with your own luggage and everything else, the official recommendation is that you should be sort of declaring these through the proper processes. Ideally, those spare parts would actually move with that main commercial import, and then it's kind of managed all properly. But likewise as well, I'm sure there will be examples whereby lots of people will do a very, very similar thing on a day-to-day basis and not picked up by customs. That's a very, very difficult question to answer. And if I was to give you the kind of correct and proper answer, it would be to try and include those spare parts within your main shipment and not carry them with you. But I know that people will do that, and a lot will get through a customs process fairly easily. It would only be if you were picked for random spot checks and stuff like that an issue may arise, but even then they may not. So, okay.
And a couple of other questions. What's the difference between an AtaCarne and a temporary move or temporary import?
Yeah, again, that's an AtaCarne. Well, okay, an AtaCarne is used for a temporary import, but there are two ways that you can do a temporary import. One is using the AtaCarne, which effectively by obtaining an AtaCarne, you are lodging some funds with a local chamber of commerce that allows you to bypass certain customs procedures. If you don't have an AtaCarne, then effectively you're going into a country and then you're following their temporary import process, if that's the way that you want to go. In theory, you could ship your goods to the UK and fully pay duties and taxes into the UK and then re-export them again afterwards. But the idea of a temporary import bond is that it suspends those duties and taxes so that you don't have to pay them, but you will be paying a bond fee, which is much less than the duties and taxes to allow you to do that. The idea of Carne is it removes that need to make those bond payments, so that it allows a slightly freer movement of goods between the countries.
And the last question for now is, where do we find out about restricted products? Can you write that down too? Is that a list that we could maybe provide, Tim, on restricted products?
Restricted products could be anything, and it's probably not massively applicable to this webinar. The reason why I've picked out on alcohol and foodstuffs is those are likely to be the main restricted products that you're going to come across on a show like this. But likewise, there are a number of military exhibitions around the world. So military products would fall into this type of subject matter. Anything that's needs export or import licenses would fall into this. Generally, I would expect with the client base that we have for IAAPA and certainly the contractor base as well, the two most likely types of restricted products that you're going to come up against are going to be the alcohol and food stuff. But it's kind of yeah, there are a large number of items. But if you were to go on to there are some links in this presentation. We can make this available afterwards. If I was to just go on to a last slide here, on the UK government website, there are two specific pages. One that looks at importing goods into the UK, and one that looks at exporting goods from the UK. Within these sections, there is a more detailed list of restricted products and stuff like that. But like I say, you'll tend to find that will cover off things like licensable products, military goods. It will mention alcohol and foodstuffs and tobacco products and things like that. But for the purposes of this presentation, I just tried to touch on what you're more likely to come across for this type of exhibition. Okay.
And we've had another question that's just come in. We are bringing attractions to be demoed at the show and then bring them back with us. What would be the best solution? Again,
I tried to mention before that there isn't a one-size solution to this. The best thing that I would suggest is when you start to look at that, the documentation behind that and the values of those goods, if they're really, really high value goods, and obviously I don't know the values here, but if we're, you know, something in the region of, I don't know, if you're talking hundreds of thousands of euros or perhaps into the million, I don't know here, that when you certainly get to those levels with the cost of placing that value of goods onto the temporary import bond, that might be relatively expensive, and you may find that the AtaCarne route is a much more practical option for you. It's something that once we start to work with you guys individually on your own individual shipments, and we've had to do this throughout the process since, again, we started back with exhibitions last year. We are very much working with individual exhibitors through ourselves, with our offices and our partner network to assess what is the best option for them. And we do see, as I sort of said before, a mixture between exhibitors and contractors using AtaCarnes and others looking at a temporary import bond route. And yeah, as I say, the best thing that we can do is look at your individual requirements and help guide you through that process from there.
I'm conscious of time here. We're almost at the hour. There's one more question, Tim, that's just come in. So I think this will be the final question and then we'll wrap up. Due to the whole process, we will maybe send our trucks earlier. If the process goes well at the border, is there an option to park near exit? That's not really relevant to this, so get back to that exhibitor. And they're looking for parking options at Excel, so get back to them separately.
Yeah, again, well, I can sort of touch on it. We see this again, a mixture across the shows, depending on the size of the goods and bits and pieces like that. There are warehouse options in play. We do also, there are options as well, is that obviously between once you clear customs at whichever border facility you're going to, even if there isn't parking necessarily at Excel, we tend to see, I'm talking away from exhibitions as well, once any kind of truck driver for any type of import is clearing customs, there are plenty of things like service stations and truck stops and things like that where drivers can go to and wait for an interim period between that customs clearance and when they need to be on site. So there are a number of options. Again, if you work with your haulier in and around that, if you're using a transport company, they will manage that as part of that process for you. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the questions for today. And thank you very much, Tim, for presenting this to our exhibitors and contractors. I'd like to thank everybody as well for your time today, attendees and Tim. And I hope you found this webinar useful. If you have any other questions that you think of afterwards, please feel free to email me, jdoyle@iapa.org. And also be aware that this webinar has been recorded, and the presentation and the recording will be available by the middle of next week. You'll get an email letting you know when that's already been uploaded onto the website. Thank you very much for your time, and wish you the rest of a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.